Good afternoon to everybody. I am Professor Luca Iaccarino. I'm working at the University Hospital of Padova, and I am the UCTD disease coordinator. And I will moderate this webinar because Christina had some problems to attend this webinar, so she asked me to moderate, and I'm very happy to moderate this webinar. I also will perform my speech, and the title of this webinar is How to Explain UCTD to My Family and Friends. So it's devoted to patients and people who want to know what is UCTD. As I told you, I'm a rheumatologist. I'm working at the rheumatology unit in Padova University Hospital, which has been recently recognized as Euler Center of Excellence in Rheumatology. And this is, in this photo, you can see all the majority of part of my colleagues working with me and with Professor Andrea Doria, who is the head of the rheumatology unit. As I told you, I'm a disease coordinator, and I'm very happy and honored to share the disease coordination with Christina and to work with Vera, who is the EPAG advocate at interim, because she helped us as a EPAG in this disease group. And Vera will perform the last part of this speech, which is particularly devoted to patients, to explain the psychological and social aspect of this UCTD, of this disease. I will deeply try to show you the medical part of this disease. So let me to go into the focus. So what about connective tissue disease? We know that they are classified as systemic lupus erythematosus, systemic sclerosis, Sjögren's syndrome, idiopathic inflammatory myositis, mixed connective tissue disease, antiphospholipid syndrome. And then we also have undifferentiated connective tissue disease. So in the next few minutes, I will try to explain you what exactly means the term, what exactly is the disease represented by undifferentiated connective tissue disease. So we already know that organ manifestation in patients with connective tissue disease can be very different. And this disease involves skin, involves joints, muscles, tendons, kidney, serosa, which is the pleural and the pericardium, nervous system, the lungs, and the heart. And all of these involvement can cause signs and symptoms of the disease. But we can have some specific manifestations, specific signs, specific symptoms. Sign is what the doctor is able to find in a patient by the medical visit, and symptom is what the patient refers to the doctor. So some of them are specific, so which means that can be found in only one connective tissue disease. As an example, only in lupus, only in dermatomyositis, only in systemic sclerosis, etc. Other are unspecific, which means that can be found in several connective tissue disease, can be found in systemic sclerosis, in lupus and dermatomyositis, so in several connective tissue disease. Just some example. If we have a specific manifestation of connective tissue disease, it's easy to perform a diagnosis. So, some example of a specific manifestation. In case of dermatomyositis, we can have a skin rash around the eyes, on the extensor plate of on the center face of the joints. As an example, as you can see here in the metacarpophalangeal, interphalangeal, proximal interphalangeas, distal interphalangeas, which are very specific of dermatomyositis, the so-called heliotrope rash, the rash around the eyes, or Gottron sign, Gottron papules, which are very, very specific on dermatomyositis, which means that with the doctor seeing one of these signs, the diagnosis is very simple, it's very easy. Again, in case of lupus, is the famous malar rash or butterfly rash. If you have a malar rash or butterfly rash, this is very specific of lupus. So a doctor can argue that the patient has a lupus. Again, the third example, in case of systemic sclerosis, the thickening of the skin can be found in the face, in the distal part of the arms, of the legs, or more proximally, the trunk, the thorax. So the thickening of the skin is typical of systemic sclerosis. So we have no difficulties in performing the diagnosis of the disease. Again, we also have specific autoantibodies for connective tissue disease. So if we have anti-double-stranded DNA, anti-SM are specific for lupus, which means that can be found only in lupus and not in other connective tissue disease. Another example, systemic sclerosis, anti-topizomerasis, anti-centromer, or in case of Sjögren syndrome, anti-LASSB, and so on for other autoantibodies specific to dermatomyositis, polymyositis, anti-synthetase syndromes. So when we have a specific manifestation and a specific antibodies, we have a diagnosis. The problem is, if we don't have a specific manifestation, a specific antibody. So in this case, we can have some difficulties in performing diagnosis. Some example, constitutional manifestation, fever, fatigue, arthralgias or arthritis, Hans edema, Raynaud phenomenon, muscular weakness, interstitial lung disease, esophageal hypomotility, or inflammation of pericardium or pleura. These are frequently observed in patients with connective tissue disease, but they are not specific, they are unspecific. And again, the first four in this list are very, very often the main onset manifestation in patients with connective tissue disease. So in this case, what to do? The scientific landscape, the scientific community, find out some classificative criteria of connective tissue disease. And there are classificative criteria for each connective tissue disease, I told you before. And what is a classificative criteria? Classificative criteria is a list of clinical manifestation, and a patient can be classified, or a person can be classified as having a disease when he is able to satisfy a minimum number of these criteria or a combination of these criteria. So this is another way to have a diagnosis of lupus, systemic sclerosis, Sjögren syndrome, whatever you want. The problem is if you have some typical or some manifestation of connective tissue disease, but we are not able to satisfy any classification criteria for a definite connective tissue disease. What to do in this case? And this problem was known in 1969 and was published this paper, the lantanic or undifferentiated collagen disease, or more recently, undifferentiated connective tissue syndrome, or again, the undifferentiated connective tissue disease, the UCTD. And this term was described for the first time in 1999 and by the group of Marta Mosk and Professor Stefano Bombardieri. And they also, in 2014, they also proposed some classification criteria. So they define in a clear way what is an undifferentiated connective tissue disease. So what they described? They described that a connective tissue disease refers to condition which share clinical and serological manifestation with definite connective tissue disease, but not fulfilling any of the existing classification criteria, which means that we have some manifestation, as an example, fatigue, arthralgia, which is a pain in joints, Raynaud phenomenon, you know, that is when the fingers change in the colors, they become white and then blue and then red when the finger are exposed to cold, as an example. So if the patient has some of this manifestation, that we see in a connective tissue disease, but can be shared in the connective tissue disease as well. So they are not specific, they are unspecific for connective tissue disease. So the patient with this manifestation, with no specific autoantibody positivity, so in this case, the patient can be classified as having an undifferentiated connective tissue disease. From this description, you can understand that patients usually have mild manifestation. So they don't have a severe manifestation, but mild manifestation of the disease. Another question is, okay, I have a new UCTD. I have understood what is UCTD, but can my UCTD evolve into a definite connective tissue disease? As an example, my UCTD can evolve in lupus, in systemic sclerosis, or whatever you want. Is it possible? There are several studies on this, and I show you one of the most recent studies, which encompasses 98 patients with UCTD, and the authors followed up this patient for more or less 11 years. And what they found? They found that the majority of patients remain stable. So the patient having UCTD with mild manifestation, etc., and in 62% of these remain stable. And also we have a good news, because 24%, which means 1 out of 4 patients, went into remission. So the disease went to remission. And only 14% evolved into a connective tissue disease. So just to conclude, these are the key points of my presentation. Connective tissue disease shares several clinical manifestations. Some are specific, so the diagnosis is easy, but several are unspecific. So we need the classification criteria. In some cases, especially when we have a mild manifestation of connective tissue disease, we are not able to satisfy any classification criteria for connective tissue disease. So in this case, the patient have an UCTD, undifferentiated connective tissue disease, which are usually characterized by a mild and unspecific clinical manifestation. And also the clinical picture usually remains stable, majority of cases, but can also go into remission, or in the minority of cases, evolve into a specific connective tissue disease. So this was my last slide, and now I would like to introduce Vera Guimarães, which who will introduce you in the part about psychological aspect, working aspect, social aspect.
Yeah, talk a little bit. Thank you, Luca. Thank you. very nice presentation. Sure, there will be some questions after my presentation too. So I'm Vera Guimarães. I am from Portugal, and I'm back at the ERN reconnet. So I'm a patient, not with UCTD, but with MCTD. But we are looking for in the few weeks a new EPAG from this kind of disease, and I bring to you some of her words from this candidate, and I will share with you her experience too. Now I would like the next slide, Luca, please. So the main theme of our webinar is how to explain UCTD to our family and friends. But it could be how to explain lupus, how to explain another CTD disease or MCTD, because all the patients share in common some problems in communicating strange and not well-known diseases to their family. I would like to say something about the family. Each one of the patients and whatever have different families. Some are married, some are not married, some have kids, some are young, some are not young, some want to have kids and didn't have a pregnancy yet. So there are all kinds of families. So we don't have an answer to your family. You have to adjust to the kind of family you have, into the structure of family you belong to. So it's family with a question mark. What is your family? How does your family work with this? So I bring a little experience from UCTD patient, Ramona, that she shared with us for this webinar. And she said that in this team family, she had a huge problem with her husband. And she says some words about that, very important, that may happen with you. That is that she tried to understand what UCTD was and went look for information in internet and so on. And she was getting educated about the symptoms, like Luca said, about what was Raynaud's syndrome. She talks a bit about that. But when she was doing that, she was learning what was the symptoms, what was the cause of the disease. Her husband could not. So a bit of she said. The fact that at the beginning I provided him alarming information regarding these diseases, that scared him. So he had, let me see, he had some scared because he gets very anxious when it comes about doctors and diseases. So she explains that she arranged another problem, not to understand just for her, but she now has her husband scared and really anxious about what is UCTD. So this is her experience. I have a different experience. You may have another experience. For instance, talking with small kids. So what do I say to my kid that has known his mother all his life with the disease? So my kid speaks about me and she says like this: my mother has a disease. I don't know which disease it is, but she's sick. So we have different experience. For instance, if you have teenagers and you get sick and they get really scared, for instance. So in family, we have to think about what kind of people we have in our family and structure. A webinar will be necessary to talk about families and reactions of the family. But I'm a psychologist. I didn't say that at the beginning as my profession. But for instance, my mother, if you ask her which disease do I have, she says oh, it's something like lupus. She can't explain it. And I explain it to her very well, but she can't do it. She can't understand how to explain to her friends. So sometimes it's difficult, even for me or for my family to understand. And they can be really nervous about understanding this. And maybe they didn't want to understand some parts. Maybe they need some time, for instance. So next slide, Luca. This is the question, family and friends. And now some words about friends. Ramona, the UCTD patient, in the time of friends, she explained to me that one specific one, not 10, not 11, one specific friend was very useful, very resourceful, and helped her and her husband to get all the information and search for good websites, good doctors. And she explained that this one friend helped the family. So sometimes we have a lot of friends, but maybe they don't know how to deal with this information. They really don't know what it is, so they can't really help us. So, and sometimes the friends are for partying, go visit something and be happy. And sometimes they are not in the mood to listen to repetitive, how do you say, symptoms. We are always talking about, I'm fatigued, I'm fatigued. So they will not ask you every day of your life, are you fatigued today? So friends have a great part in our lives, but sometimes not all friends are prepared to deal with your sickness. So maybe you have to choose some of your friends to speak about this, and other friends can't really do it. And that's okay too, but you need someone. So in this part, in my personal experience, I have the phrase for my head that you lose some, you win some. So sometimes you lose some friends that understand you can't climb a mountain with them anymore, but you win other friends that understand your reality and give you support. So sometimes we have to be realistic about the personality of the friends and what we really need from them. So next slide. I put a little slide about work because some majority of the patients I know are working. So they need to work, they need to take care of their families, they have friends to go out. So sometimes some of the most time of the day they are working. So maybe at work we should also be prepared and try to bring a positive workplace culture. So you're not the sick person that is always asking your boss to go to the doctor appointment or to do this in the workplace. But sometimes you need that the workplace really helps you getting along your symptoms and your needs. So we can't forget in this webinar this very important space that is work. I will tell you a little story. I have a problem with hot. I'm always with lunch and very hot with me. And I put the air conditioner very cold. It's very cold. So what happens when my patients come to me? They know that it's very cold in various room. So what they do? They help me. They bring the coat. They respect me, my needs, because they are patients and they know I respect their needs. So they say, "Well, keep the air conditioner. I bring the coat." But my colleagues, what do they do when they enter my room? They always say a joke. "Oh, it's cold inside. It's like the crypto. Oh, it's so cool, put it up. So you see, sometimes this is also an example. Sometimes the colleagues, and these are health workers, professionals, have a joke, deal very well with our needs or symptoms. But other persons, in this case, my actually patients, understand and help me get along with this hair conditioning thing. So this is what I want to bring just a light to the work. You all have different examples, of course, and each work has its own difficulties and challenges, of course. So I really want to work in the summer here because I'm air conditioned and I don't like to have vacations at hard times. So it's good for the workers too. They want to go in the summer. So next slide. So to think a little bit about how to explain UCTD with these characteristics or another disease to my family in France, I think I have thought about this with my patients and my colleagues and my colleagues from IPEC's colleagues, and it's very important that you do it your way. You should be forced to do it in the kind of way like the psychologist says, the doctor says, or your mother says, or your husband says. No, you have to do it and as your way says it, as your personality needs to do it. It's the Frank Sinatra way. I do it my way because it's the way you know at the time. Maybe in some time we'll know in a different way, but at this time it's your way. So you will do it as you know, as you need it. So it's the way I know better. I put it on the slide. So another thing sometimes patients speak to me, it's people are rushing you to do something and to accept something. You have to accept this, you have to talk about this, you have to do this, you have to run, you have to go to the gym, you have to eat well, etc., etc. But you have to do it on your time. You have your time to do it, your psychological time to do it. It's not your friend time, not your mother time. So they have to respect, maybe not today, maybe tomorrow, they have to respect your way to get acquainted with your disease and your symptoms. So another thing I put here is my words. So sometimes you don't really have the words, that's okay, or you don't know how to explain with words that with time you will be able to do it, of course. But maybe you don't say Raynaud's syndrome. That's okay. You talked about your fingers, what happened, the color they are, and you will learn about every symptom and every medication and so on. So your words you can resume and compare. It's like sometimes I say a word. Some doctors don't like when I say that and give me a fringe when I say it hurts like a dog fighting. That's my word to explain the pain. So I don't know how to explain better. So we have to have words to explain the symptoms. So let me speak as I know, and with time we will learn another way to communicate, for instance. And for last, but not the least important, the feelings. It's my feelings. So I can say, I feel something. It's not what you feel. It's not what you want me to feel. It's not what you want me to fight. We work a lot the word, you are a fighter, you are fighting, you are doing so well. But they don't really ask what are you feeling really at the moment. And that's important to get your needs in front of you and you get expressed and be helped in that needs. So what I propose is to try. It's not done and it's not in a book of communication or in the social book or in a psychology book. It's in you. You have to try, you have to train, you have to be educated in communication, for instance, in interaction, social interaction, sometimes with friends, can be hard to explain these things, and relationships more strong, like with mothers, fathers, son, husbands, wives, and sometimes symptoms and other challenges may be problematic in the interaction or in the relationship. So that would be another webinar, of course, but it's important you understand that it's not done the work, it's a process. So the next slide, please. So an important word for me, because I'm an EPAG and I not always was educated about my disease, UCT disease and other diseases, is patient education. And when we say patient education, we are speaking about caregivers too, or the husband or the wife or the friend, whatever. So it's a continuous process, like in other diseases. There are amounts of work done with caregivers of Alzheimer's, for instance. So we need that for this disease and other diseases like this one. It's education about what to do, how to do it, which symptoms, which signs, what challenges does the patient have, how to help him. So it's very particular. There is no book about you. There is no book about Vera or about Ramona from UCTD experience. So we need to learn and to be educated. So that's why this webinar, to get started thinking what I need to learn, what I need to perform my knowledge. And the next slide. I haven't spoke yet about this team. Another team in explaining family, friends, caregivers, and so on are the doctors, are the team, the multi-professional team in some countries. Not always. Sometimes we just have the doctor. Other countries have the nurse, the nutritionist, the psychologist, whatever, which reality is different for each patient. But we need to get along with the doctors that are treating us and that can hear our needs and doubts and, of course, symptoms and signs of the disease, but they can help sometimes with this communication, with this interaction with family and friends, giving us correct sources, correct information, and taking in account not just the symptoms, but the life itself. So now I will wait for your questions, right, Luca? Because it's all for my part. Let me see if there are questions here.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that there are two questions. There's one for me and one for you. So I would like to start with the question for you. Can caregivers and family members support the patient? And probably how to support? And the second question, how can we explain fatigue and pain?
Okay, so I'll start from fatigue and pain because I try to analyze that. You have to have your own words, your own metaphor, your own ability to speak. Of course, the nurse and the doctor have scales for that. Just the simple one, from 1 to 10, for instance, how much fatigue do we have, or how much pain do you have today? That's okay, but you can have another language, another communication that allows you to explain better the fatigue in you. For instance, sometimes I use the expression, today I have an elephant stepping on me. It's a great fatigue. Sometimes I say, oh, it's just a little bit hard to get along in the morning, but it gets better in the afternoon. So we have to use language to communicate better this kind of difficult symptoms to express to doctors and nurses. But fatigue and pain, there are a lot of weapons to communicate and explain these symptoms. The other question is much harder. How can caregivers and family members support the patient? We should have a manual about this, a webinar about this, but caregivers and family have to respect the personality of the patient, have to respect his own way of dealing with it. We can't impose my way or your way. We have to respect. And probably sometimes that is tiresome for the families and for the caregivers, because it's a chronic disease that may get sometimes worse or not, but sometimes. So not all family members are prepared to support correctly the patients. That's why there are some members that are caregivers and there are other members that are not caregivers. They are just our family. And sometimes I say the word, sometimes, for instance, your husband is not your nurse. He doesn't know how to do that. You have to tell that with another person, because, for instance, this husband can't do it. But sometimes we have a spouse, we can say, oh, you're even better than my nurse. You are understanding so well and doing so good. But it's a challenge and a process. There is no rapid answer to that.
Thank you, Vera. One question for me. What should a person expecting long term when the diagnosis of UCTD is received? So I can answer that when a patient have a diagnosis, what we see is that the probability that the UCTD evolve into a connective, defined connective tissue disease is higher in the first 3-5 years of the UCTD. And the percentage, other studies demonstrate that the percentage of evolvement is 3% per year. In the first 3-5 years, after, the probability that the UCTD remains stable over time is very, very high. So this is I hope that to have answered to this question.
We have another one from Olga. I think it's for
a long question. Thank you very much for the question, which educate patient how to communicate to members of family, friends, and colleagues and heads of department at his or her work. Firstly, I often ask me to talk about the symptoms of my illness. I have learned a lot. I have changed my approach, but it took time.
Exactly. It takes time. I'm now speaking here at the webinar that will be recorded and everybody will see, my family, if they want, or anyone. But in the beginning of the process of my disease, I didn't want the people to know I was sick because I was very young and I feel discriminated in the work, in doing things. So it's sometimes very difficult to assume that you have this kind of symptom and you feel really ashamed of being this kind of disease. That and maybe because people don't really want to know about this rheumatic, the connective tissue diseases. You don't have how a colleague of mine says, a sexy disease. It's not very well spoken. You don't have a cancer, and everyone supports if you have cancer. I have cancer. They support me a lot. I didn't saw that with the other disease I have. So I think it's a difficult disease with difficult symptoms, and sometimes you are really alone in your boat, and the team in your boat, and the team is your professional healthcare that really can understand what are you talking about. But with time, your ability to speak out of your symptoms will change with your time, with your education, with your knowledge, with life events that will come in your life, and we will change with time, probably or not. We are doing as we can and how we can. So I share a lot what Olga said. Really, I was really ashamed at the beginning, but that's what we have. For instance, I gain weight, a lot of weight, a lot. I have obesity right now, and that ashamed me a lot. So why didn't I get thin? Why didn't I get small? Whatever. So it's difficult. It's difficult. Depends on the person, of course. But thank you for your wonderful question.
There is another point where that often people, when heard about rheumatic autoimmune disease, think they think that can involve only old people. You see a young lady or a young man affected with a rheumatic disease, they say that's not possible. He's lying. He's not lying. He's really affected with the rheumatic disease. So we need to educate not only patients, of course, patients, but also the general population. So what is it? Everybody knows is cancer. Everybody knows what is leukemia. Everybody knows what's a genetic disease for a baby or something like that. It's an important disease. Not misunderstanding me, please, but very important disease. But there are already important also rheumatic disease. So probably me and also you, we need to educate not only patients, but also the general population to what is a rheumatic disease, what is lupus, what is rheumatoid arthritis, what is UCTD.
Yeah.
Sometimes
that's why,
undifferentiated connective disease. The doctors say that is something, but probably we evolve and then not involve, and it can go to remission. So normal people say, well, you're not sick. No, you are sick. This is the
yeah. So in that line of what you were saying, my rheumatic association asked some school to do marketing about what you were talking about, and when we saw the work done, it was very well designed, very good. But when we saw the persons on the slides, they were old people, very old people, and we asked them, why did you put old people in the communication? And they said, oh, it's not just for the old people, and we have to explain the word designers, and we needed different ages in the formation pamphlets and so on, because sometimes the general public don't know that really young people have this kind of diseases. So that's true. We need to get along with other persons in the community, not just the family and friends, of course.
Okay, I think that if there are no more questions, we can close here the webinar. I would like to thank you, Vera, for your excellent presentation, very educational, very, very interesting. I hope also, I'm sure, very useful for patients. And also, I would like to thank all of you, all the audience, for asking us, for your attention, and see you in the next webinar.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Luca, with your time, your preparation for this very difficult to explain in a short time. It's very difficult and disease for the public. So it was very important. We have very professional, and they are involved in this kind of work. So it's very good we have you here too. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.